Michelle sat on the edge of the bed, holding a pregnancy test with trembling hands. Her heart pounded erratically as she anxiously awaited the result. Each second felt like an eternity. For the past 5 years, she and her husband, Juan, had been trying tirelessly to have a child. The journey had not been easy. Together, they faced numerous challenges, including the loss of Michelle's parents. Juan had always been her pillar of strength, supporting her through every difficult moment. Sleepless nights, tears of frustration, and medical appointments had become routine. The dream of building a family kept them united and determined to keep trying. Each month brought new hope, only to be followed by disappointment. Michelle often found herself imagining what life would be like with a baby. She visualized sleepless nights rocking the little one, the clumsy first steps, and the shared laughter at the park. Despite the difficulties, hope never abandoned them. The doctors had said that Michelle's anxiety and early egg production made conception difficult. Even so, they continued trying, month after month. Finally, the pregnancy test showed 2 lines. Michelle let out a scream of joy, tears filling her eyes. She couldn't believe it, but she was finally pregnant. With her heart overflowing with happiness, she ran to tell Juan, who was in the kitchen preparing dinner. Seeing her run in, he dropped everything and embraced her, sharing the joy of that unforgettable moment. Their dream was about to come true. Since the day they got married, Michelle and Juan dreamed of starting a family. This deep desire was the foundation of their relationship. Nights were filled with conversations about the future, imagining what it would be like to have a baby. They thought about sleepless nights rocking the little one in their arms, and sunny mornings taking them to the park to play. Each attempt to conceive was an emotional roller coaster. Michelle and Juan shared the hope of a positive test, only to be disappointed month after month. Every doctor's appointment was a new chance to understand what was wrong and how they could overcome the obstacles. The doctors suggested that Michelle's anxiety and her early egg production were factors that made conception difficult. Even so, the couple did not give up. With each new cycle, they renewed their hopes and continued to dream. Their love grew stronger with each challenge faced together. Juan was always by Michelle's side, holding her hand during appointments and wiping her tears during moments of disappointment. They shared every sigh of frustration and every tear of despair, but also every smile of hope. When they finally received the news that Michelle was pregnant, it felt as if the world had stopped for a moment. The happiness they felt was indescribable. They were ready to embark on the journey of parenthood, determined to face any challenge that might arise. Their dream of starting a family was finally coming true, and nothing could shake that happiness. The days following the positive pregnancy test were filled with unparalleled joy. Michelle and Juan lived in a constant state of euphoria. They frequently hugged, sharing looks of complicity and smiles of happiness. The first doctor's appointments were emotional moments. They heard the baby's heartbeat for the first time, a sound that filled their hearts with joy and hope. Every exam and ultrasound brought new emotions, and the couple couldn't contain their happiness. Michelle's small belly began to show, and she felt proud to notice the changes in her body. Juan, for his part, was enchanted to see her touch her belly with tenderness. They began planning for the future, discussing names for the baby and imagining what the nursery would look like. Michelle and Juan decided it was time to share the good news with his parents. They organized an intimate dinner at Juan's parents' house, where the joy would be multiplied. Juan's parents had always been like parents to Michelle, especially after she lost her own. They had supported the young couple from the beginning. During dinner, Michelle and Juan, with a mix of nervousness and excitement, shared the news. Juan's parents reacted immediately. Tears of happiness filled their eyes as they embraced the couple. Laughter, hugs, and well wishes filled the room. The couple's happiness was now shared, and the house was filled with love and hope. Everything seemed perfect. Michelle and Juan had stable jobs and a loving support network. The future seemed bright and promising. With the pregnancy progressing well, Michelle and Juan decided it was the perfect time to share the news with more loved ones. Their happiness multiplied each day, and they wanted to share this joy with their closest family and friends. They planned a special dinner at Juan's parents' house to announce the news. During the dinner, the anxiety and excitement were palpable. Michelle and Juan, with smiles on their faces, shared the news that they would soon be parents. Juan's parents' eyes filled with tears of happiness. Warm hugs, laughter, and words of encouragement filled the room. The news brought new light to everyone's lives. Juan's parents had always treated Michelle like a daughter, and the idea of becoming grandparents filled them with joy. For Michelle, who had lost her own parents, the support and love from Juan's family were invaluable. The news of the baby brought renewed hope and a new reason for celebration. The house was filled with love and optimism. Michelle and Juan felt blessed to have such a supportive family. Happiness seemed complete, and nothing could go wrong. However, life sometimes plays unexpected tricks. One morning, while Juan was driving Michelle to work, a car out of control collided with theirs at an intersection. The impact was devastating. Michelle and Juan's world turned upside down in an instant. Juan, injured but conscious, fought to reach Michelle, who was unconscious. Paramedics arrived quickly and took them to the hospital, where a new and agonizing wait began. The accident that changed everything happened on an apparently ordinary morning. As Juan drove Michelle to work, a car out of control collided with theirs at an intersection. The impact was brutal, turning their world into a chaos of lights, sounds, and pain. Juan, despite his injuries, managed to stay conscious and immediately tried to reach Michelle, who was unconscious in the seat beside him. Desperation took over as he called for help. Paramedics arrived quickly, carefully removing Michelle and taking them both to the nearest hospital. At the hospital, Juan waited anxiously as doctors worked frantically to save Michelle and the baby. Hours passed like an eternity. Juan was treated for his injuries, but his concern was entirely focused on Michelle. He couldn't shake the fear of losing both his wife and his child. Finally, the doctors came with devastating news. Michelle had suffered severe injuries, and the baby had not survived the impact. The news hit Juan like a crushing blow. The dream of becoming parents, which seemed so close to coming true, had been brutally taken from them. Michelle was kept in an induced coma, while doctors did everything they could to stabilize her. The uncertainty about her future was unbearable. Juan found himself plunged into a nightmare from which he could not wake up. He spent days and nights at the hospital, holding Michelle's hand and praying for a miracle. The hope that she would wake up was what kept him going. Even with a broken heart, Juan refused to give up on the woman he loved. The days following the accident were the darkest Juan had ever faced. Michelle remained in a coma, and the baby they had so lovingly awaited did not survive the impact. The life they had dreamed of and the happiness they had shared were brutally interrupted. Juan felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under his feet. At the hospital, he became a constant presence, spending hours by Michelle's bedside, holding her hand and talking to her, hoping his voice would bring her back. The nights were long and lonely, filled only with the sound of the machines keeping Michelle alive. Each day was a battle for Juan, who struggled against sadness and hopelessness. The sight of Michelle, motionless and silent, was a constant reminder of what they had lost. The medical team did everything they could to care for Michelle, but her recovery was uncertain. The doctors explained that the brain injuries she suffered were severe and that the coma could last indefinitely. The uncertainty about the future was agonizing. Juan's parents and the couple's friends offered support, but nothing could fill the void he felt. The pain of losing the baby was unbearable, and the possibility of losing Michelle as well was unimaginable. Juan clung to the hope that she would wake up, refusing to accept any other possibility. He made silent promises to Michelle, vowing that he would never give up on her, no matter how long it took. The tragedy had destroyed his world, but Juan was determined to fight for the love of his life. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, the hope that Michelle would wake up began to fade. Juan spent more and more time at the hospital, holding her hand and talking about his day, his hopes, and his fears. He refused to give up, but the reality of the situation was starting to weigh on him. Medical bills piled up, and the financial pressure increased every day. Juan knew he needed to work to keep up with the expenses, but the guilt of leaving Michelle alone was overwhelming. He divided his time between work and hospital visits, but increasingly felt he was failing in both aspects. The medical team continued to monitor Michelle, but the prognosis was not encouraging. They explained to Juan that although Michelle was stable, there were no signs of improvement. The possibility that she would never wake up was becoming more real. With each visit to the hospital, Juan felt a bit more of his hope disappear. He found himself looking at Michelle, trying to remember the happy moments they shared, but the sight of her motionless and unconscious made it difficult. The pain of seeing his wife like that was almost unbearable. Juan began to question his choices and blamed himself for not being able to do more. Friends and family tried to console him, but their words rarely brought comfort. He was trapped in a cycle of sadness and despair, struggling to find meaning in the midst of chaos. The hope that once kept him strong was fading, but Juan refused to give up completely. As time passed, Juan had to face the harsh reality that his life needed to continue, even with Michelle in a coma. The medical bills were overwhelming, and each month he received amounts that seemed impossible to pay. Determined to keep Michelle connected to the machines in the hope that she would wake up one day, Juan began working long hours. He took extra shifts and did everything he could to keep the financial situation under control. However, this meant he had little time to visit Michelle. Each visit to the hospital became a painful reminder of the life they had dreamed of together and that now seemed so distant. Juan sat by Michelle's bedside, holding her hand and talking about his day, his hopes, and his fears, even without receiving a response. His life became an exhausting routine of work and hospital visits, an endless cycle of physical and emotional fatigue. Even so, he refused to give up. Every morning when he woke up, Juan told himself that this could be the day Michelle would open her eyes. That small hope was what kept him going. The faith in the love they shared, and the promise they had made to be together in good times and bad, gave Juan the strength to continue. The hospital became a second home for him, a place of pain but also of hope. The healthcare staff, who initially didn't know how to act, began to admire Juan's dedication. He became an example of love and perseverance, even in the face of such difficult circumstances. As the months turned into years, Juan continued to make unimaginable sacrifices to keep Michelle connected to the machines and to cover the ever-increasing medical bills. Each extra shift he accepted, each sleepless night, he felt the weight of responsibility grow. His health began to deteriorate due to constant stress and lack of rest. Even so, Juan did not allow himself to stop. He believed that if he worked hard enough and continued to fight, Michelle might wake up one day. Hospital visits were the only thing that gave him the strength to continue. Sitting by Michelle's bedside, holding her hand, and talking about the day was a way to maintain the connection between them. Although Michelle did not respond, Juan felt that she could hear him, and that gave him a glimmer of hope. The hospital staff, who initially didn't know how to handle the situation, began to admire Juan's determination and love. They did everything possible to support and care for Michelle, ensuring she was comfortable and receiving the best possible treatment. Despite the exhausting routine, Juan never complained. He knew that each sacrifice was a way to demonstrate his love for Michelle. Even when the days became unbearably difficult, he remembered the promises they had made to each other and found the strength to continue. Juan's sacrifices did not go unnoticed. Friends and family recognized his dedication and did what they could to help, but no one could completely alleviate the burden he carried. Juan was determined to keep fighting, regardless of the cost. Over the years, loneliness and the weight of responsibilities began to affect Juan in profound ways. It was in this context that Alejandra, a close friend of Michelle's, became a constant presence in his life. Alejandra had always had feelings for Juan, and the vulnerable situation he was in provided the opportunity for her to get closer. Initially, Alejandra offered emotional and logistical support, helping Juan with daily tasks and accompanying him on some hospital visits. Her presence was a comfort amidst the chaos. However, over time, Alejandra's feelings for Juan intensified, and she began to desire more than just friendship. Juan, consumed by loneliness and stress, eventually gave in to the closeness and comfort Alejandra offered. He found in her a temporary escape from his pain and loneliness. The relationship between them evolved from friendship to something more intimate. However, each moment with Alejandra was marked by an overwhelming feeling of guilt. Juan loved Michelle deeply and felt he was betraying his wife by getting involved with another person. Alejandra, for her part, was determined to win Juan's heart completely, even knowing that he still loved Michelle. This complex situation created an emotional whirlwind in Juan. He was torn between his eternal love for Michelle and the need to move forward with his life. Each visit to the hospital reinforced his guilt, but Alejandra's company gave him the strength to continue. This duality of feelings made Juan's life even more complicated, but he was determined to find a way to balance everything. 5 years passed since the accident, and Juan continued to struggle with his feelings and responsibilities. Alejandra, now his lover and confidant, argued that keeping Michelle connected to the machines was inhumane and a significant financial burden. Sitting on the sofa in his apartment, with a glass of wine in hand, Juan and Alejandra had an intense and emotional conversation. Alejandra looked into Juan's eyes and said, "Juan, you can't go on like this. Michelle wouldn't want to see you suffering this way. You've done everything you could, but now it's time to let her go." Juan lowered his head, his fingers nervously playing with the edge of the glass. "I can't, Alejandra. She's my wife. I promised to be with her in sickness and in health. How can I just disconnect her?" Alejandra sighed and held his hand. "I know it's hard, but keeping her connected to a machine isn't life. And you're destroying yourself in the process. Besides, think about the costs. You've been paying these bills for years, and it's affecting your life in a way Michelle would never have wanted." Juan nodded slowly, tears welling up in his eyes. "It's just that every time I visit her, I feel like I'm betraying her. But I also know I can't go on like this." Alejandra squeezed his hand with determination. "Juan, she was my best friend. We need to be realistic. She's not really here anymore. Letting her go is the most humane thing we can do, both for her and for you." Juan was torn, his heart broken between his eternal love for Michelle and the need to move forward with his life. After a long and difficult conversation with Alejandra, he finally made a decision. With slow and heavy steps, Juan entered the hospital. The weight of the decision he had made seemed to make each step an eternity. His face was marked by the wrinkles of stress and pain, and his eyes reflected deep sadness. Many hospital staff recognized him immediately, even though it had been a long time since his last visit. He used to be a constant presence, but his absence in recent years had been notable. As he approached the reception desk, his presence caused a stir among the staff. The nurses exchanged surprised looks upon seeing him again. The last time they saw him, he still had hope. Now, he seemed a shadow of the man he once was, worn out and exhausted. With a trembling voice, Juan asked to see his wife, communicating his intentions to the hospital staff. The silence that followed was palpable. The nurses, who had cared for Michelle with so much affection and dedication, were speechless. They knew what Juan's presence meant and what he was about to do. With a silent gesture, they allowed him to enter, giving him access to the room where Michelle had remained all those years. As he walked down the corridors, memories of his life with Michelle flooded his mind. The wedding day, the plans for a family, the dreams shared, and the promises made. He entered Michelle's room with a heavy heart. There she was, as beautiful as ever, with pale skin and hair spread over the pillow. She looked like a sleeping angel. Juan approached, held her hand, and sat beside her, feeling a wave of emotions overwhelm him. As he leaned in to kiss Michelle one last time, Juan noticed something that left him completely paralyzed. Initially, he thought he was imagining things, as it seemed impossible. He decided to share his concern with one of the nurses on duty, who confirmed, horrified, that his suspicions were correct. Michelle was pregnant. Her belly was visible under the hospital gown, indicating that something very wrong had occurred. The nurse, shocked, decided to perform all the necessary tests on Michelle. The results confirmed that she was 5 months pregnant, exactly the time Juan had not visited her frequently. The news devastated Juan, who felt guilty for neglecting his wife, trusting that she would be safe in the hospital. The nurse, sharing Juan's indignation, knew they needed to act quickly to find out who had committed such an act. "Juan, we need to inform the authorities immediately. We cannot let this go unpunished," the nurse said, her voice firm but trembling. Juan nodded, his face hardened by the decision. "Yes, you're right. Michelle deserves justice. I won't let whoever did this get away with it." Together, they went to the police and filed a formal complaint. The authorities, shocked by the severity of the case, began investigating immediately. They interrogated the hospital staff, reviewed security cameras, and gathered all possible information to identify the culprit. As the investigations progressed, Juan returned home, where Alejandra was waiting for him. She had been by his side throughout the process, but now felt the distance between them growing. During the police investigation, the search for the truth intensified. Juan, now focused on finding justice for Michelle, actively cooperated with the authorities. He provided all possible information and encouraged the hospital to rigorously review its records and security cameras. Each interview with the hospital staff revealed more about the daily movement in Michelle's room. The security cameras were analyzed meticulously, every minute of the videos examined. However, the identity of the culprit remained a mystery, as many healthcare professionals had access to her room. Juan, with Alejandra's constant support, began to put even more pressure on the hospital and the police. He knew that justice for Michelle would not come quickly, but he was determined not to leave the situation unresolved. Meanwhile, the hospital staff who cared for Michelle were also in shock. She had become a symbol of resilience and hope for many. The discovery of her pregnancy was a devastating blow to everyone, and many felt personally betrayed by the horrible act committed against her. Amid the search for justice, Juan divided his time between his work, hospital visits, and meetings with investigators. Each day was a test of his patience and determination. Even with the growing pressure, he maintained the hope that the truth would come to light and the responsible party would be punished. The pain of seeing his wife in this state, and now with the shocking revelation, motivated him to fight even harder. For months later, Michelle's condition required urgent medical intervention, as childbirth was imminent. Michelle, even in a coma, was about to give birth. The news that the baby was about to be born filled Juan with a mixture of emotions: fear, sadness, and unexpectedly, a spark of hope. The little girl was born underweight but miraculously healthy. Juan, despite the pain of not having Michelle conscious by his side, felt a wave of love and protection for the baby. He held her in his arms, feeling deeply and inexplicably connected to her. The girl, who was born under such difficult circumstances, was now a symbol of hope amidst the darkness. Even knowing the terrible circumstances of her conception, Juan decided to embrace the baby as his daughter, promising to protect and love her. This birth brought a new dynamic to Juan's life. He needed to balance his work, visits to Michelle, and caring for the newborn. Although Alejandra's presence was a comfort, she felt increasingly excluded from Juan's life. She expressed her dissatisfaction, saying, "I can't believe you're doing this, Juan. I won't be a substitute mother for a child born this way." Juan, determined to protect his daughter, responded, "Alejandra, this baby is not to blame for anything. She is innocent and needs a loving home. Michelle and I always dreamed of having a family, and this girl is part of that dream." Alejandra, feeling betrayed and displaced, decided to distance herself, leaving Juan alone to face the challenges. Juan's decision to raise the baby, despite the circumstances, created unbearable tension between him and Alejandra. Alejandra, who had been a pillar of support, now found herself in a complicated position. She couldn't accept the idea of being a substitute mother for a child conceived in such a tragic way. "I can't believe you're doing this, Juan. I've been by your side all these years, but this is too much for me," Alejandra said, her voice filled with frustration and sadness. Juan tried to calm her, explaining his position. "Alejandra, this child is not to blame for anything. She is a part of Michelle, and I can't just abandon her. Michelle and I always dreamed of having a family. This baby is a miracle, even under the most difficult circumstances." Alejandra, with tears in her eyes, replied, "You're choosing a child that isn't really yours over what we've built together. I don't know if I can continue like this." Juan, feeling the weight of his decision, said, "I understand it's hard. If you can't accept this baby, then I don't see how we can stay together. She needs a loving home, and I'm willing to give that to her, even if I have to do it alone." Alejandra, feeling rejected and out of place in Juan's life, made her decision. She gathered her things and left the house, leaving Juan alone with the baby. Alejandra's departure was a painful blow, but Juan knew he was doing what he believed was right. He dedicated himself completely to the little one, determined to offer all the love and care she deserved. A few days after the baby's birth, the hospital sent a letter to Juan informing him that he had signed a document years ago, stipulating that Michelle would be disconnected from the machines after a certain period. Now, he was expected to fulfill that agreement. Juan, feeling that this action was an attempt to avoid potential lawsuits, became desperate. He firmly believed that the hospital wanted to get rid of Michelle to avoid future liabilities. Determined to fight for his wife's rights, Juan consulted lawyers, filed appeals, and sought support in the media. He did everything he could to prevent Michelle from being disconnected, but unfortunately, the law was not on his side. The hospital authorities, perhaps influenced by financial interests, refused to budge. The day Michelle was to be disconnected arrived. Juan, heartbroken, made one last request, to bring the baby to see her mother. Surprisingly, the hospital board agreed, moved by Juan's plea. He entered Michelle's room with the baby in his arms. The atmosphere was heavy, filled with sadness and resignation. Juan placed the baby next to Michelle, hoping that the moment would bring some comfort. Something extraordinary happened. The baby, who had been restless and crying, stopped crying immediately when placed next to Michelle. Her tiny eyes fixed on her mother's face, and a soft laugh escaped her lips. Suddenly, the machines that kept Michelle alive began to register signs of activity. Michelle's heart rate increased, and to everyone's surprise, her eyes opened. The miracle that no one expected happened. Michelle opened her eyes, leaving everyone in the room astonished. Juan, who was kneeling beside the bed, couldn't believe what he was seeing. His tears of despair turned into tears of joy and gratitude. With a trembling voice, he whispered, "Michelle, my love, you're back. You don't know how much I've prayed for this moment." Tears continued to stream down Juan's face as he held Michelle's hand and showed her the little baby. "This is our daughter, Michelle. I know it's a lot to take in, but she's ours." Michelle, still weak and disoriented, looked at the baby in Juan's arms. The news that she had a daughter deeply impacted her. Tears of joy and sadness mingled on her face as she tried to process everything. Juan, very carefully, began to tell the truth about the baby to Michelle. He spoke about the horrific discovery, the months of pregnancy while she was unconscious, and how someone had taken advantage of her vulnerability. Michelle cried uncontrollably, hugging her daughter as she tried to assimilate the information. Determined to seek justice, Michelle and Juan initiated legal action against the hospital and those responsible for the terrible act. They mobilized resources and ensured that the culprit would not escape justice. In time, the case was resolved. Various DNA tests were collected, and the culprit was identified. Michelle, still recovering from the shock of waking up and discovering she had a daughter, began to rebuild her life alongside Juan. The family's reunion was a moment of immense emotion. Juan, who had fought so hard to keep Michelle alive, now had her back, and they had a daughter to care for. Michelle's recovery was slow, but each small progress was celebrated. She needed physiotherapy and psychological support to deal with the physical and emotional traumas she had suffered. Juan was by her side every step of the way, offering unconditional love and support. The little baby, who had brought hope amidst the darkness, became the center of Michelle and Juan's lives. They dedicated themselves to creating a loving and secure environment for her. Every smile from the baby was a reminder of the miracle they had received. Over time, Michelle began to resume some of her daily activities and to connect more deeply with her daughter. Juan, for his part, found a new source of strength and purpose in seeing his family reunited. The scars of the past were still present, but the love they shared helped to heal the wounds. The reunion also brought challenges. Michelle had to deal with the pain of knowing that someone had taken advantage of her vulnerability. She found comfort in Juan's support and the determination to seek justice. Together, they faced these challenges, strengthened by love and the hope of a better future. Determined to find justice for Michelle and their daughter, Juan and Michelle worked tirelessly with their lawyers. The truth about what happened during the months Michelle was in a coma needed to be revealed. Various DNA tests were collected from all the hospital staff. The investigation was intense, with every staff member being interrogated and all security records being thoroughly reviewed. The pressure increased as the days passed. But Juan and Michelle were determined to uncover the truth. Finally, the results of the DNA tests pointed to a culprit, one of the doctors who frequently visited Michelle. The discovery was devastating for everyone, especially for Michelle, who had fully trusted the medical team. The doctor responsible for the act was immediately removed and brought to justice. The revelation of the culprit's identity brought a mix of relief and pain. Relief for finally knowing who had committed the despicable act and pain for the betrayal by someone who was supposed to care for Michelle. The hospital staff was in shock, and measures were taken to ensure that something like this would never happen again. Michelle, still dealing with the emotional complexity of the situation, found strength in Juan's support and the need to protect her daughter. Juan's love and determination were crucial in helping her face these difficult moments. With the culprit identified and imprisoned, Michelle and Juan began to focus on recovery and their family's future, determined to overcome the past and build a new life together. After the shocking discovery, Michelle and Juan initiated legal action against the doctor and the hospital. Determined to seek justice, they mobilized all possible resources. Michelle and Juan's lawyers built a strong case based on DNA evidence and testimonies collected during the investigation. The case attracted media attention, and Michelle's story became a symbol of resilience in the pursuit of justice. In court, the details of the case were revealed, and the doctor responsible for the despicable act faced a rigorous trial. The testimonies of the hospital staff and the evidence presented by the prosecution were crucial to the case's development. Michelle, despite the pain, attended the trial to tell her story and seek justice for herself and her daughter. Her courage and determination inspired everyone around her. Juan was by her side, offering constant support. After a tense and emotionally exhausting trial, the doctor was found guilty and sentenced to prison. The hospital was also held accountable for negligence and ordered to pay significant compensation to Michelle and Juan. The victory in court was a moment of relief and validation for Michelle and Juan. Finally, justice had been served, and they could start focusing on rebuilding their lives. Despite the scars of the past, Michelle and Juan found strength in the love they shared and the determination to offer a bright future for their daughter. The experience made them stronger and more united, and they were ready to face any challenge that life presented them. The courtroom was packed on the day of the sentencing. Journalists, friends, and family gathered to hear the final verdict. Michelle's case had attracted the attention of many, and the world awaited the outcome. The judge entered the room, and silence fell over the crowd. After weeks of testimonies and evidence presentations, it was time for the decision. The judge read the sentence with a firm and decisive voice. The doctor responsible for the despicable act was found guilty of abuse and gross misconduct. He was sentenced to a long prison term without the possibility of parole. The sentence brought a sense of justice to Michelle and Juan. Finally, the responsible party would pay for his crimes. In addition to the doctor's conviction, the hospital was held accountable for negligence and failure to protect Michelle. They were ordered to pay significant compensation to the family and to implement strict measures to ensure that such an incident would never happen again. The reading of the sentence was a moment of relief and emotion for Michelle. The tears streaming down her face were of relief and gratitude. She looked at Juan, who held her hand tightly, sharing the moment of victory. For Michelle and Juan, the sentence represented the closing of a painful chapter in their lives. They could finally begin to focus on the future and recovery. Justice had been served, and their determination to seek the truth had been rewarded. With the culprit behind bars and financial security assured, they began to plan the next steps in their recovery journey. With the sentence handed down and justice served, Michelle and Juan began to focus on their recovery. The journey to rebuild their lives would not be easy, but they were determined to overcome the challenges together. Michelle needed an intense process of physical and emotional rehabilitation. Physiotherapy helped her regain mobility and strength, while psychological therapy sessions helped her deal with trauma and pain. Juan was by her side every step of the way, supporting and encouraging her. The support of friends and family was essential during this period. They offered unconditional love and support, helping to create a positive and welcoming environment for Michelle and her daughter. Every small progress Michelle made was celebrated as a great victory. In addition to physical recovery, Michelle and Juan also needed to adjust to the new family dynamics. Raising the baby brought joy and challenges. Juan divided his time between work, caring for his daughter, and supporting Michelle. He was determined to ensure that both received everything they needed. The couple's strength became more evident each day. They learned to support each other in new and profound ways, strengthening their bond and renewing their promises of love and commitment. Despite the scars, Michelle found strength in her family. Her daughter's smile and Juan's unwavering love were constant sources of motivation. Together, they began to envision a brighter future, where the pain of the past would give way to hope and happiness. Recovery was a long road, but Michelle and Juan were ready to walk it together. As Michelle and Juan advanced on their recovery journey, the love between them grew stronger. The challenges they faced together solidified their bond, making them even more dedicated and resilient partners. The daily life of the family was filled with small moments of joy and gratitude. Every baby's laugh, every step of Michelle's progress, every show of affection from Juan, they found reasons to celebrate. These moments, though simple, were powerful reminders of how much they had overcome. Juan continued to be a pillar of strength for Michelle. He balanced his work with family care, always finding time to be present for the important moments. His dedication and love were evident in every gesture and word of support. Michelle, for her part, found strength in her family. Juan's love and her daughter's smile gave her the energy needed to keep fighting. She knew that despite the difficulties, she had a bright future with the people she loved most. The support of friends and family continued to be crucial. They helped with the baby's care, offered shoulders to cry on, and words of encouragement. The support network around Michelle and Juan was a constant source of comfort and motivation. The painful experience they faced did not break them but transformed them into a more united and determined family. They learned to value each moment and find strength in adversity. The love they shared was the foundation of everything, and with that love, they were ready to face any challenge the future held. Michelle and Juan's story is a testament to the strength of love and human resilience. After years of struggle, pain, and unimaginable challenges, they managed to find hope and happiness again. Their journey is a powerful reminder that even in the darkest circumstances, it is possible to find light and overcome adversity. Michelle and Juan want to express their deep gratitude to everyone who supported them throughout this journey. To the friends and family who stood by them during the most difficult times, offering unconditional love, support, and encouragement. To the healthcare professionals who cared for Michelle with compassion and dedication, ensuring she received the best possible treatment. To all the lawyers and advocates who fought tirelessly to ensure justice was served, and to everyone who shared their story and helped bring the truth to light. Special thanks go to those who offered a friendly shoulder, words of comfort, and small acts of kindness that made a huge difference. Every smile, hug, and word of encouragement was essential for Michelle and Juan to find the strength needed to continue. Reflecting on their journey, Michelle and Juan hope that their story can inspire others never to give up, even when everything seems lost. They learned that true love can overcome any obstacle and that hope is a powerful force that can illuminate even the darkest moments. Their story continues, now with a future full of possibilities and promises. Together, they look to tomorrow with optimism, ready to create new memories and cherish every moment with their beloved families.